Слушай, въебали! Иди нахуй, блядь! Куда нахуй не добьют они, блядь!
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the rundown. There is a lot going on. We are trying to filter a great deal of information as rapidly and yet as accurately as possible. So let's tell you what we know. We know there's been a great deal of military action in Russia in several different locations. We're going to talk about what that action is. We know, we were live with Starsky not that long ago. We've invited him to come back. He has agreed, pending, and he and I spoke on this briefly. I mean, the reality is, well, this is obviously big news for him. He's in the military. He's going to be in life and death situations tomorrow, the next day, so he needs to get some sleep. So he may come back. We've also asked Commander McMillan to join us for obvious reasons. So what's going on? We were talking with Starsky just at the wrap-up of the show about Prigozhin, who is the head of the Wagner mercenary group that has usually been rather skilled, but they've lost a lot of their troops. He became critical of Russia several months ago, became critical of the military and government. He suggested that maybe he be put in charge as supreme commander of all Russian military forces. That's all Russian military forces across the globe. That did not get received very well. All right, thank you. Yeah, so I'm going to be interrupted quite a lot, I suspect, during the show. And anyway, so that was seen as perhaps a huge power grab by him. Putin seems to have responded by having him siege Bakhmut, which is an area we've talked about a lot. Strategically, it's not all that important. It was decided that Wagner should take the city. They, for the most part, did at a tremendous cost, and it looks like the Russian military stopped supplying them. He took this very personally, came out, criticized them, said that they were trying to wipe out the Wagner group. That looks like that may well be true. About 2 days ago, he made a statement. We played it earlier when Starsky was here just a couple of hours ago. In it, he said that the entire war was a lie. Russia's been lying to everybody, sacrificing all of their troops, sacrificing all of their people, and that this had to be stopped. He started talking about the methods they were using to lie, to say that they were doing better, when in fact they were losing across the board on all fronts. About 8 hours after that, it looks like a Russian military strike on Wagner positions took out a, quote, significant number of Wagnerites. It looks like Moscow hasn't even denied that this was done on purpose. They haven't said it was an accident. Prigozhin believes it was deliberate, I think with good reason, and has basically said that now Russia is trying to eliminate the Wagner military group and declared war on Russia. He issued a statement saying that people should stay inside their homes. Anybody who left their homes he would see as a combatant, and suggested that he was going to invade Russia. Russia seems to have taken this seriously. They've deployed a number of military units inside Moscow. We've seen columns of, well, not columns, I suppose that's probably an inaccurate term, but a large number of armored personnel carriers and tanks being deployed throughout Moscow. It is odd to have this map up once again, but we are now looking at Moscow. We believe at this point one military base has suffered some form of serious damage. There's a fire in a base that is actually bordering Ukraine. We don't know yet if this was an attack. It seems like it is out of Wagner's position, but it does appear at this point as if Prigozhin is attempting a coup against the Russian government. He certainly has called for one. He claims now that he has 20,000 troops in his command. We do know that he has the loyalty of a number of Russian soldiers. We know that there's already a contingent of Russian soldiers that has in fact invaded Russia from the Ukrainian side and been reasonably successful with no more than about 100 or so troops. So the question is, how successful can he be? This unit has been the most successful in Russia, but it has been, during the war, it has been the most successful against the Ukrainians. And we've talked before, it's been the ones that Ukrainians have most feared up until they were decimated in Bakhmut. There are still a lot of them around, but they are now reduced largely to prisoners forced to work, all drawing from Russia. Prigozhin has, and I asked Starsky this a while back if he felt that Prigozhin does in fact care about his troops, and Starsky seemed to believe that he probably does. This doesn't obviously speak. The man gives me the willies for any number of reasons, not the least of which is, unlike most sociopaths, or psychopaths, no sociopaths, he's perfectly capable of killing, just as is Putin, but he seems to enjoy it. I don't know that Putin enjoys it per se. I just don't think he cares. At any rate, we're getting a lot of unconfirmed reports, some of it pretty crazy stuff. So we're sorting through it now. But at a minimum, we know that there is a Russian military base in Rostov that is on fire. There was a massive explosion. We have footage of it, and we will be showing you that in a moment. We're also going to try to bring that up in this window. We know that there's been significant military deployments in Russia, presumably defensively. There's been some suggestion that some of them are actually offensive, that they are revolutionaries. We've seen no evidence of that, although we've seen some evidence that there may be revolutionaries in the south. Again, he has basically said he is going to march to Moscow and remove everybody. There is a report that Putin has not been, that he is unreachable. That is not a shock, and in general, that is not news, and I almost didn't mention it. The reason I'm mentioning it is because it isn't news, so it should be made aware. If you hear, gee, nobody knows where Putin is, that's usually the idea. After 9/11, Bush was not reachable. It didn't mean he wasn't okay. So we don't know, but apparently they've been trying to get a hold of Putin. Now, Putin, to the best of my understanding, has actually not been in Moscow for a while. We believe he's been in a train that just doesn't stop moving, in the locations of which have been classified. So in order for him to be in any real jeopardy, somehow Prigozhin would have to know where that train is. We do believe, and this is one of the conversations I was having earlier as well. Starsky and I spoke a bit about this off air after the show. Prigozhin, I think, is doing this in part because he's very, very upset. He clearly was upset. He feels like the Russians are trying to kill him, so now he's going to try to kill him back. But Prigozhin is reasonably pragmatic, and I don't think would do this if he didn't think he had a good shot at winning, if he didn't have the loyalties of at least some people in Russia that nobody knows about. I strongly suspect he's got support that nobody knows about, or at least he believes he's got that support. Whether or not he's got it, in reality, I think we're about to find out. But I do not think he would do this aggressively without having thought it through to some extent and already have contingency plans in place for this. So I think we can safely assume that he does have those plans. Whether or not he has the loyalties he thinks he does is always the question. So there's a lot going on. I'm going to start to go through some of the new information that's come in, but in the meantime, I would like to welcome 𝐒𝐸𝐿 to this. 𝐒𝐸𝐿, well, welcome. How are you? All right. You are either muted or there's an error on my side. Either is distinctly
I figured it
possible. Okay, perfect. Welcome. How are you?
It was an error on your side.
But that's, you know what, I think nobody would believe it. It doesn't matter if you fixed it from your position by turning on your microphone. Nobody's going to believe that it was anything but an error on my side. So, welcome to the... Every time I call you, it's like, you're like, you know, if Nick's calling, it's got to be something.
Usually, yeah. Just kicking back, relaxing after the day of driving across the eastern part of the country, and then you're like, oh, by the way, just in case you wanted to know, I think I might cover this. It appears that there might be a civil war or a military coup going on in Russia right now. Oh, really? Of all the people you could call, you called me because I'm such a stellar expert on Russia.
Well, we also call Starsky and Lance, and hopefully we will be hearing from them. Lance is otherwise occupied, and once or twice when he's been otherwise occupied, he has made a very big effort to make it to the show, and he has. But I'm aware that, you know, it's like he's got a family, and he needs to make sure that they're satisfied, because if he keeps failing to do shows, they're not going to be pleased with him, and that's not good for anyone. So we'll see. At any rate, the FSB has set up, so we know there are roadblocks across Moscow. We've got some images of that. A number of roads have been shut down. The Wagner Center in St. Petersburg has been seized by special forces. So that's, PMC Wagner Center in St. Petersburg has been seized. And a lot's going on in both Rostov, and I'm not sure why Rostov. Let's see. We'll get them. You know, probably bring that up. Okay, that's the armored vehicles. And it looks like there is the arrest for Prigozhin. The U.S. is aware and watching this closely. Let's see. So there's a criminal proceeding now against Prigozhin. Big shock. Let me see if I can get the video. So we believe this is accurate. If we didn't, I wouldn't be showing it, but we don't know for certain, but we believe what we're about to show you. I'm very confident, actually. Though it hasn't been confirmed, but I am confident that this is from a base. Actually, no, this is in the Moscow region. It is a military base. We don't know which base, but we believe there was an explosion. And, all right, I'm not hearing any audio.
Там прям открытое пламя. Ну вот оно. В общем, такие дела.
We're going to play that one more time. So that is a military base outside of Moscow. Now, we know that there have been a lot of explosions. We know that there's been a lot of civil unrest.
Через кусты не видно, там прям открытое пламя.
Okay, that's either a firefight.
В общем, такие дела.
All right, so that sounded like ammunition going off. That's either a firefight, people shooting at each other, or it's an ammo dump that's been hit. But I don't know if you could tell us, Andrew, but that sounded like shots to me.
Depending upon how close you are, and on audio, it can get difficult sometimes to tell the difference between rounds that are just essentially cooking off or if people are actually shooting at each other. If I knew what it was being filmed on and exactly how close they were to it, I could give you a better idea. Generally speaking, rounds cooking off are not nearly as loud as firearms are.
Okay, so it looks like roads are being closed north and northeast. The Don M4 highway is closed. That is in southern Russia from Ukraine, so it looks like they're anticipating something coming up from Ukraine into Russia. These roads are major arteries towards Moscow. They have been closed by the Russian, presumably by the Russian military, if they've got any military. I don't know what they're using for this. So what I'd like to do, we've got here, I may get in Google Maps. Google Maps is reflecting these close. Okay, that's impressive. Now, somebody pointed this out, and I think this is worth noting. I mean, who closed it? If there's a military convoy of 20,000 men coming up that, you can say it's closed. All right, and I would like to also, at this point, welcome Commander Lance McMillan, who is joining us. Commander, how are you?
Oh, thank God.
Yeah.
Hello?
Hey, Commander, and what I'm going to do, since we got a video for him, I'm going to put him in camera 2. So sorry, Xander, I'm going to push you out, but we got a video of him, so I want to. We'll still have your audio, but I'm going to put his face up in camera 2. So, Commander, welcome. We've been communicating. I've been sending you what I've got. I know you've been watching some other sources. What's your initial reaction to what's going on?
It's very confused. We'll just leave it at that. We know something's going on. We know it involves Wagner forces. There are multiple reports that there's a 30-mile-long column of Wagner troops driving towards Moscow right now. There's some reports that there are, I think it's MVD troops surrounding a Wagner compound somewhere. We don't know if this is Wagner trying to seize power for himself or attempting to seize power on behest of somebody, presumably Putin. I really can't say. All we know is something is definitely going on, and the Russians are reacting as one would expect them to.
Let's go after the second scenario you just mentioned. Why would Putin be attempting to seize power in this way, and what would he be doing, and why is that even on the table as a possibility?
Well, I look at it this way: if you're Putin and you're desperately seeking a way out of the mess you've dug yourself into, you can't admit you goofed up. That's, as we've talked about before, kind of a death sentence. But if you can find a gullible scapegoat and say, oh, look, it's all his fault. I've been misled. I've come to my senses. We will stop this madness. That may be what's going on. I can't say that's for sure, but there's definitely a possibility that's going on.
So far, for somebody who's inciting a revolution, there is one thing that seems certain, which is he's criticized everybody, but specifically Putin. Now, he's indirectly criticized Putin because he said every member of the government, but he hasn't called out Putin and said that any of this is Putin's fault. So you think that it's at least a possibility that this is actually happening at Putin's behest, and then what would Putin's next move be?
Well, if Putin wants to purge the generals who he thinks may be plotting against him, or purge various upper echelon oligarchs, or purge MVD troops, or what have you, that would be a great way to do it, because now you have a casus belli, so to speak. You can blame them that this is all their fault, that they started it, and Prigozhin was just coming to his aid, if that's the way this is being played out. We at this point still don't know exactly what's going on. One of the interesting comparisons I've seen, somebody said this would be the Russian equivalent of a Knight of the Long Knives, with Prigozhin in the role of Rome. So he's trying to jump early as opposed to, stay in the Hofbrau with his buddies and get purged in the morning. He's trying to jump and take them out early. So there's lots of possibilities of what's going on.
I will ask you to find the Knight of the Long Knives in a minute. It does appear now, so first of all, the CNN is reporting that an American official that has remained unidentified. I don't know what that means, since we don't even know what this is, but apparently there is obviously significant action happening in Russia right now. It also, we've had multiple reports of at least one column, and we're told now possibly units from the National Guard of Russia advancing on Moscow from the south.
Prigozhin's earlier appeal was directly to the National Guard, and it also contained within that appeal a threat was that any National Guardsman who doesn't rally to the flag under, his banner that he's leading to save Russia will be deemed traitors and executed after he is in power. So carrot and stick.
All right. We also have now an official statement from Russia. I'm trying to get that up. Let's see. Moscow. I guess. Okay. I guess they were on television denying that there were any disruptions when television was cut out.
There's no problem.
Yeah.
Listen to this rendition of The Black Swan by Tchaikovsky.
Exactly.
Is Andrew any thoughts?
That rendition may end up with a little bit of extra bass in it very soon. My thoughts are, may you live in interesting times. It would be very nice to have a better, clearer picture of what's going on, and unfortunately, usually in very dynamic, fast-changing, and unexpected events, or at least unexpected this quickly, it's always hard to tell exactly what the heck is going on, and I keep hoping. It's almost terrible to say it. It's like I keep hoping we don't wake up tomorrow and realize that it was a bunch of people shooting off fireworks and everybody got bent out of shape and overreacted. And it would be one of the best ways to bring a close to the war in Ukraine very quickly. So I'm hoping for that outcome.
I've seen enough now. I think that's highly unlikely. Certainly at the beginning, I think that was on everybody's mind. Now
there were also reports of some Wagner compound being shelled by the Russian army.
I missed that one. I do know that the Russians have seized the offices in St. Petersburg. So they've seized and encircled that. I don't think they've actually shelled it or attacked it. I do think there was a position, I think it was a Wagner headquarters that they did hit. So it looks like the leader of the Freedom Russia Legion, which we've discussed before, and they have they have come out with a statement. They're the ones who basically captured a small portion of Russia earlier, using about 100 men. Basically, it seems like what they are saying is that they want to put an end to the war and liberate their motherland from this rotten system, no matter who it is, Putin's or Prigozhin's. So it seems to me that while you might think that they are completely endorsing Prigozhin on this, they don't appear to be completely behind him. I think on the grounds that they don't want to replace one dictator with another. That seems to be what they're saying. But as of yet, we haven't heard of any movement from them.
Somebody in the chat stream just said every piece of news from Russia is suspect. Yes, that's true. Yes. So everything we see that is being reported, we have to take with a very large grain of salt.
We have at least had
salt. How about the Great Salt Lake? Take it with the Great Salt Lake.
Very much so.
So it looks like there's now military checkpoints along every major road around Moscow. Moscow's been essentially encircled by what appears to be loyal military. Moscow is clearly taking this very seriously. A U.S. official has said that this is real. So at a minimum, while we don't know what it all means, we do know now. So Prigozhin has, and I'm going to do a rundown as to how we got here. All right. Let's see. And now the administration of the president. Okay, so the presidential offices have also been sealed off by the military. Again, we don't believe Putin is there. Last my understanding was Putin is on a train and has been for quite some time that just keeps moving and nobody knows its exact location. So we're going to do a rundown. Yeah.
That's the Snowpiercer. They got to find the Snowpiercer in order to end the tyrannical regime.
Also wanted to quickly do a shout out. We had wrapped up with Starsky, and I had to leave. I had to go, spend some time with family, and then I had been getting just all these DMs, and I was just like, oh, it's just everybody congratulating me on a good show. And we knew some of this Prigozhin stuff. We didn't think it would just pop off like this. And so I started to check it, and all right, I'm going to switch the audios here. This will allow me to all right, so I was getting, I think it was on Xandring's channel. I've muted you as Xandring just for a minute. Thank you. So anyways, so I was getting a lot of DMs and a lot of people giving us the information we really need to do these shows. And to be quite honest, so many people send us so much stuff, we usually use the Discord to sort it. So you'll see a lot of this information on the Discord. That's how we get our information first. But, sometimes people will just put in like, oh my God, this is so interesting. And it's not always, not always exactly what we need. And it's always great when we have people who send us exactly what we need when we need it. And I just wanted to thank in particular CF Beauty, because she was the one who sent me like 20 DMs like, Nick, are you there? Are you there? Something's happening. And really gave us all the information we needed when we needed it very rapidly, and got us moving on starting this. So I just wanted to say thank you very much to CF Beauty for all of that. And we're getting a lot of information from a lot of sources, but she was sort of the start of that for us on this, and one of the reasons we are moving as quickly on it as we are, because once again, and I'm proud to say, we're ahead of a lot of media on this. So thank you very much for that. So, all right, what we know is that the Wagner Group has become very sort of disenchanted with the Russian military. They've been criticizing the military for the last few months. It looked like the military basically wanted to significantly diminish them, and was doing so by having them fight in Bakhmut and cutting off a lot of their ammunition and other supplies, and also mining the road on the way out, according to Prigozhin. They discovered as they were attempting to leave that the road had been mined by the Russians. So obviously some tension. About 48 hours ago, he criticized the war heavily, said everything was lies, talked about how these lies were made by the Russian government, and Russia appears to have responded by bombing one of their main positions. This they obviously took some umbrage to, and about 2 hours ago, maybe a little more than that, I think, Prigozhin came out and said that he was declaring war. And what he said was, I think, on the essentially on the Russian government, but people are basically taking that as he's either declaring war on Russia. I don't know. There's nuance there that I don't think translates from Russian well, and we certainly don't know exactly what his intentions are, but he seems to have indicated that he is going to attack Russia. There are reports that there's a column of his heading towards Moscow. Now we haven't confirmed that. What we have confirmed and know for a fact is happening is that Moscow has deployed a number of tanks and armored personnel carriers and set up a perimeter. They've cut off most of the roads. Also, the roads coming up to Moscow from the south have been closed, meaning they seem to think that at least there's a possibility of something coming up from there. And at least one military base in the Moscow area, we don't know which one yet, appears to have suffered an explosion of some kind. And we had images of a fire there earlier. So in any case, a lot is popping off. So having gotten into all of that, I've got a few more things I'd like to look into and try to see what we have. I was hoping that, Commander, you could once again sort of give us an overview of what you think is happening and what markers you're looking for to give you an indication of how serious a threat this is to the Putin regime, or if this is actually really Putin trying to consolidate power. And so if you don't mind letting us know about that, and I'll save my next question for after.
Sure. So I think the key thing everybody is waiting for right now is some declaration by Putin himself that will clear up very muddied waters about whose side Prigozhin is on, and whether this is a coup by the Ministry of the Interior and or the army against Putin, which is definitely a potential possibility, or it's a coup attempt by Prigozhin to oust Putin and install himself at the top of the donkey. That's kind of what we need to know. Other than that, we know that Prigozhin and Wagner Group forces are in motion trying to do something. It looks like they're trying to storm Moscow to seize the instruments of power so they can. How successful that's likely to be if the head of state is still at large, I think you can all imagine.
I want to state it says everything's in when we're like, well, we know this and this, and this, it could mean these 20 different things.
Yeah.
Like,
point. Everybody wants a concrete, simple statement of fact, and we don't have that right now. All we know are certain indicators of what might be going on. And I think that's part of the element of frustration and confusion that's going on, is nobody's really sure what is actually going on in terms of motivations behind these movements. So we just have to kind of infer for ourselves from the facts that we do know what it may be and what's the most likely and what is the least likely. I'll go back and explain my earlier analogy to the Night of the Long Knives, explaining what that is, because I think it's pertinent here. So the Night of the Long Knives is in Nazi Germany, and basically Hitler has been issued the equivalent of an ultimatum by the industrialists and the army that they need him to eliminate the SA, the Sturmabteilung, under Ernst Röhm, which was kind of like the private army of the Nazi Party. And so Hitler and his tiny bodyguard go out one night and arrest and murder all the senior SA commanders. The reason this is pertinent here is because it could arguably be said that Prigozhin and Wagner Group are kind of the SA in this situation. And the military is saying, look, if you want us to continue to work with you, you need to eliminate this idiot who's causing so many problems for us and the country. So that may be what's going on. Conversely, it may be, as we've said just recently, it may be that it's Putin worried that the army is trying to supplant him and install their own leadership in charge, maybe leaving him as a figurehead, maybe just eliminating him. But it's a case of Putin using that private army, Wagner Group, to oust them so he can secure his own position. Those are probably the two most likely courses of action of what's going on here.
Well, and since he hasn't actually gone after Putin by name in any of his statements, which I'd have thought he'd have done, that is interesting. We did just learn, however, that the what is it? The Interior, it wouldn't have been the Foreign Ministry, and I got checked out. One of the ministries in Russia has now placed Prigozhin on their list of foreign operatives. So he's been updated as I don't know if that changes the mathematics.
That would be the Interior Ministry.
Okay, it was the Interior
Ministry is effectively the equivalent of the U.S. Marshals combined with the FBI and every other law enforcement agency across the country. The internal security apparatus of Russia.
Well, and the fact that
if they're declaring him the enemy of Russia or a foreign agent, which is effectively the same as saying he is an enemy of Russia, then that kind of leans to he's acting on his own and not trying to oust, or he's acting on his own and not acting on behalf of Putin. Not proof, but it's suggestive.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned it. Otherwise, when I was like, yeah, of course they did that. I was like, well, so why is Rostov so important? It looks like the roads out of Rostov are being closed. It looks like the reports are that Wagner is moving into Rostov, which I didn't think they were in that area. I thought they were sort of northwest of that. But why Rostov?
Rostov is a major transportation hub. So if you want to get on the big highways, if you want to get on the rail network, that's probably the best place to do it. Yeah, there are connections elsewhere, but it's not the giant marshalling yard. It's not the major transportation hub in the south center of Russia. So that's why they would be proceeding there. It's also probably the major logistics hub for the entire Russian army operating in Ukraine. So if you seize that and grab all those supplies, it basically hamstrings the army that's down in Ukraine from being able to do much to stop you.
So it looks like he has made an offer to the Prigozhin has made an offer to the National Guard to join him. It looks like Russia is now coming up with a counter offer, and they're all sort of vying for the control of the National Guard. I think I could see ways in which that could be beneficial in either of the two scenarios that you have stated. It looks like there is confirmed contact. That column is believed to exist. A number of people have said it exists. There's no visual confirmation on the column, but it looks like there's now multiple reports that Wagner groups have in fact engaged the military. It looks like it's National Guard in Rostov, and there was a brief firefight after which it looks like the National Guardsmen dropped their weapons, turned, and ran. That's what we're hearing. It seems reasonably credible, but we don't have any video or anything confirming that. We do have one video that looks like it may be of the column, so I'm going to look at that. Yeah, we'll get that up in a second. We do have footage now that we're being told is of the column, so I'm going to quickly check our source on that, but it looks good, so we'll see if we've got it. Andrew, what are your thoughts on this as we cover it?
It's a mess, and I have a feeling that if we want to really figure out what's going on, it's going to be a while of watching bated breath, trying to sort through all the different images and information coming out. So I think it's going to be speculation for quite a long while until we can sort through all of the crap that's come up and all of the video that's been posted to see what is current and what might be recycled.
Yeah, we won't know for sure what's going on until we read it in the history books about 20 years from now.
There is an audio statement from, let me just quickly, there's an audio statement from Prigozhin, who is claiming that he has assaulted Russia on multiple fronts, including Belgorod and including Rostov, and is claiming now there's multiple prongs of attack. And like I said, we do have some footage, and I think we may have footage from Rostov as well. But he has come out and now claimed, and it looks like it's audio, and it looks like the audio is at least verified that it is him, claiming now to have Wagner forces from several different locations has now penetrated into Russia. That's what he's saying. Any thoughts on that, Commander?
The one that really stunned me is when you said Belgorod. I would imagine that any Russian forces, regardless of whether they're Interior Ministry, Army, National Guard, what have you, that are in Belgorod are worried about and dealing with the Free Russia Legion folks. So that's a really bizarre claim. I can't say whether it's true or not, but it just seems rather odd that he would say that one, because that's one area I would expect very little action to back him coming from, unless he's now trying to, sort of extend a hand to them saying, oh, come and join me, and we'll storm Moscow together.
Now, they were closest to Belgorod, was my understanding, though, was that a lot of his forces were already in that region, so that was the one I actually would have expected first, to be honest.
Huh.
I mean, well, that's what I had thought, but that after coming off of Belarus, they'd headed in that direction towards the border, but I may also be conflating ones. So what I'm going to do here is...
well, no, it would make sense, because if you wanted to take troops to deal with that, those guys would be a perfect group to do it.
So this is, well, yeah, they were on their way there to also presumably help shore up the border there from the incursions from the Freedom Russia Brigade. This is reportedly the column. Now we've seen this before, so well, I'm not going to comment. This is purportedly, and it comes from a reliable source, but we don't know where they got it from. So this is purportedly the column heading up towards from Rostov or through Rostov and on its way to Moscow. Is what it is. Let's play it.
I wonder if anybody's told them that things like LED lights exist. Oh, at least one vehicle there has like functioning headlights.
We'll play that again. I'll try to listen to the Russian. It's Tiponyl. All right. I didn't make out enough to like grab a sentence off of that, but I can try that again. All right. So can you tell, gentlemen, does that tell you anything, either of you?
There's definitely a column of troops moving somewhere. It's surprising to me that the majority of them look to be in trucks and not APCs. If guys in trucks run up against any kind of well-armed, well-equipped formation, they're going to be at a severe disadvantage. So
it tells me that vehicles moved from somewhere towards somewhere else at some point
in the dark.
In the dark, yeah, without very good lights.
All right, so I would like to thank both of you gentlemen for your spectacular insight, and I would like to thank all of you for watching In Time, where you can learn that something happened somewhere at some time, done probably by someone, and most importantly, in the dark.
Well, we can come out with definitive statements that, it has to be this, and then when we're proved wrong later.
No.
When we're proved, yeah, that's...
Now, Commander, we both agreed, remember, we both agreed that if he wanted definitive statements, he was going to have to get, I just forgot his name. We just did a show on him not too long ago, too.
Not Baghdad Bob, or who?
Țian.
Țian? Oh, Țian. Oh.
Yeah, Țian. Peter Țian. Yeah, we agreed that if he wanted definitive statements, he was going to have to get him on.
Yeah, that's all you'll get is definitive statements.
Oh, Jesus, yeah.
I'm very curious to watch what's going to happen in Ukraine.
Yeah,
with all of this, I can't imagine that. Regardless of what actually is happening in Russia, it's does appear to be a big enough, at least diversion or a disruption to open quite a few windows for Ukraine here. So,
sure. If I were the very Ukrainian curious. High Command, I'd step up the pressure of the attacks. They're in confusion and chaos right now, and reinforcements are all going to be going inwards as opposed to outwards. So that would work for them. On the one hand, the motivation of the troops at the front, and they will, I guarantee you, have heard that something like this is going on, is going to be absolutely miserable. It's like, I don't know who's in charge. I don't know who to be loyal to. Why should I die in this trench to a bunch of well-equipped, well-trained, highly motivated Ukrainians? I'm just going to throw my arms up and go that way.
I suddenly see a valuable target behind us. Let's attack that way.
No, we're your friends. We're shooting at the Wagnerites over here.
All right, let me. I'm trying to get any of the nice thing about this map is it tends to show, and I should actually, we need to move down, but we've got now this map which looks like it's Google Earth, maybe the traffic, which is kind of ironic since that's how we proved that the invasion was happening in the first place. But we believe that major artery there is closed, and that slowdown would indicate that something's happening there. Presumably, that's where the column is. And if so, my understanding is, that's the major artery straight to Moscow. So it looks like that's what he's trying to do. We've gotten a few reports, and I've talked about this before. We're getting, people are freaking out because nobody can reach Putin. Of course nobody can reach Putin. Again, after 9/11, nobody could reach Bush. That was one of the reasons why having one of the reasons you should always have, this was something that Trump never understood. And I get it, there's a lot he never understood, but the reason you have to have a press pool is so that there's people who's already cleared to be near the president of the United States. So when there's an emergency, there are people who can prove he's alive. When he went into the, underground bunker, wherever he was on 9/11, there were people from the New York Times who were cleared to be with him despite that high level of security. And while they couldn't say where they were, they could go back and say, yes, the president's alive. I saw him alive 30 seconds ago. They don't do that same kind of thing, I don't think, in Russia, but at any rate, I'm not surprised that nobody knows where he is.
And if you're Putin in this situation with all this chaos going on, you definitely want to make sure that everybody knows I'm okay. I'm still in charge. If you've seen the movie Valkyrie with the German attempt to assassinate Hitler, it's the same thing. As long as the boss is still around, that's where everybody's loyalty tends to go. And the coup in the case of the July 44 plot only works so far as people think Hitler is dead. The moment it becomes clear that Hitler isn't dead, the coup's over. I mean, it just dries up and blows away in the wind that fast.
I had forgotten about that. That's a great analogy. I did want to say something else. I know, call back to something we said a few minutes ago, but I'm aware there are a lot of channels to listen to hear about this now, and we're very glad. Thank you all for coming here. We really appreciate it. We do our best to bring you the fastest information as accurately as possible. But if you're looking for claims to certainty when we really don't think it's justified, I can recommend a few channels to you. That we're not one of them, and we take a lot of pride in the fact that when we speculate, it's always educated, and we always let our audience know that we are speculating, and we try to show as many sides of it as possible. So, and we do sometimes speculate. I think that comes with the job, but I think admitting that we're speculating and not like, nobody's heard from Putin, he's dead. It's great for subs. I've seen it work. It's marvelous. I do understand the temptation to do it. That is not in time now. It never will be in time. So, if that's what you're looking for, you're at the wrong place. If you're looking for the best, we can,
we'll have a lot more possible certainty that he's dead when Radio Moscow suddenly goes silent and only starts playing Swan Lake and continues to do for 96 hours, which is what happened after Stalin passed.
So it looks like there has been an attack. The Russian army has, in fact, it's the Wagner headquarters in Rostov. So the Wagner headquarters in St. Petersburg has been seized by the military, but we don't believe there's been any shots exchanged or any damage done there. But we do believe that the Russian military has attacked the Wagner headquarters in Rostov. We know that Moscow has now redeployed at least, let's see, what is it? They've deployed, sorry, I had it a second ago, the mechanized troops to Rostov. I don't know what that means. I just know that they've been transferred to the city and are active as of this moment. I don't know where they are. If they transferred them from Siberia, it's going to take them a while to get there. But clearly something is happening in Rostov, and they're taking it very seriously. We also now have multiple sources showing footage of Russian planes in the air flying at low altitude in that area. We don't have reports from civilians that I've seen of any combat or any evidence of combat, but we have multiple sources that have said, yes, in fact, there's been at least a skirmish, and the National Guard ran away. So,
big surprise.
The one thing that kind of surprises me is if they're really going to try and rush into Moscow, going up a major highway of any kind in a concentrated group seems incredibly stupid to me, because there's things called jets and attack helicopters, and when you line yourself up on a nice straight narrow choke point and you just got a nice long column, that's where you want to call in an A-10 Warthog and go, oh, I'm sorry, they don't have anything as cool as that, but they've got these things that are like bombs that they can drop right on them. Exactly. Just a pass and goodbye. I mean, that's a really stupid thing to do. Why? I can't imagine. Well, I mean, they've done lots of really stupid things, but I would not want to be in a column of military equipment rushing towards Moscow on an open road. That would be terrifying.
The Russian Ministry of Defense is now saying that, quote, taking advantage of Prigozhin's provocation to disorganize the situation. Well, I'm just quoting. I have not. This isn't English. Is not this person's first language. Near Bakhmut, the AFU is concentrating units of the 35th Marine Brigade and the 36th Mechanized Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine for offensive preparation. So it sounds like, I mean, it's Russian defense minister. Who knows if there's any truth to that? But it is what you had said you were expecting, which is that if they can, they're going to take advantage of this. I mean, this sounds like, I mean, if you're Ukraine right now, if you're in the Ukrainian military, I think you're thinking two things like, oh, awesome, popcorn is the first thought that would go through my mind. And then the second thought that would go through my mind is, how do we move now to just, I mean, can you imagine the confusion if all of a sudden Ukraine does something, aggressive in this situation?
And it's a fleeting opportunity. The longer they wait, the less chance there is that they'll be able to successfully exploit it. So it's one of those, you got to jump now. And no military likes to jump spontaneous like that. They want to plan everything out and have, well-established ideas of how they're going to proceed from there. But sometimes you don't have that opportunity. You just have to go now.
Hope like hell that your previous training holds up and that anything that you've worked out beforehand is kept in the forefront of your mind, because it's an amazing way to lose huge numbers of people just due to absolute confusion.
Yes, please.
Of the two armies in the field here, there's one that has a chance of being able to exploit it, and the other one, it's Bozo the clown with his pants down around his ankles.
Anton Garashenko, who is he's an advisor to the Minister of Internal Affairs of Ukraine. We've mentioned some of his stuff before. Is saying that there's panic in the Kremlin because they cannot reach Putin. This is what you were talking about, right? Which is so long as until he shows his face. And that was in Valkyrie. That was actually one of the most impressive. I mean, in Valkyrie, there was just this one moment where they had they realized Hitler was still alive, but it was about to work. And they're like, if we can just make sure nobody knows he's alive for like another 2 hours, we can win. But it didn't work. Anyways, nobody can reach Putin. The Kremlin is negotiating about something with General Governor Dumin. I don't know what that means. That may not mean anything. Yeah, okay. I was hoping somebody here could. And that people in the Kremlin that are in the presidential administration are now seeking possible emergency relocation, including to destinations like Uruguay. Okay. I'm going to admit that all of that sounds very close to just sort of the wild speculation. There may be sources for that. If it wasn't coming from Garashenko, I wouldn't have even said it. And some of that's to be expected. I mean, okay, but what does that mean? Somebody's sitting there saying, oh my God, am I going to maybe have to go to Uruguay? And like, oh my God, they're thinking about going to. So we don't know. But what this reflects is the general chaos and disarray about what's going on. I do want to know who General Governor Dumin is and why on earth he's being mentioned by Anton Garashenko. But I don't.
I brought up his Wikipedia page if you want me to summarize it for you.
Please, sir.
Okay, so Dumin is a former deputy minister of defense. He was also head of, the Moscow Military District, the Federal Security Service, blah, blah, blah. Deputy Chief of the GRU, which is Military Intelligence, Russian Special Operations Force. So the guy has lots of credentials within that intelligence security apparatus. He was Putin's chief of security and his personal assistant before being promoted. He is currently the governor general of the Tula district, which is kind of in central Russia, sort of south of Moscow. So it would be between Moscow and Rostov. So if you're driving a column of forces up the road to get from Rostov to Moscow, having this guy on your side would be hugely helpful. Conversely, having him on the other guy's side would be problematic.
Well, I find it hard to believe. I mean, if he was that close to Putin, anybody who was ever that close to Putin, usually their loyalty is like guaranteed.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I find it hard to believe that. I mean, if the Kremlin's trying to reach him,
unlike Prigozhin, he's not part of that central group of security intelligence people who kind of run the country from top to bottom. So Prigozhin's an outsider. He's just basically a street thug that was good at putting a private military together to do plausible deniability operations. So he's not part of the circle. So I can easily see that this guy was contacted and asked, hey, would you stop this idiot before he gets to Moscow? And he's calling out his National Guard elements to stop them. That's something to explain, is that each of these districts has its own private National Guard. It's kind of like U.S. states have their own private National Guards, but they're a little more loyalty focused on whoever is the governor general of that oblast than they are to the larger Russia in toto.
Okay. Well, that helps. That helps put that into context. All right. Thank you. So this is footage we have. It looks like it is a checkpoint in Moscow. It is one of the many checkpoints that has now been set up. You can see they're basically stopping all traffic. They're checking everybody's papers. Now it looks like, right now, you wouldn't happen to know the distance between and what's the likelihood. I mean, let's assume best case scenario, which is that Prigozhin does in fact have the troops he claims to have, which he's claimed around 20,000. I would imagine, given what we've seen of the previous attack that occurred in Russia, and even the Russian police forces couldn't really repel it. I assume that Wagner, if they're serious about this, and if they
Rostov to Moscow is about 1,100 kilometers, and assuming clear traffic conditions, and if you aren't worried about running over some local farmer's tractor or a school bus of kids, it takes about 12 and a half hours to cover the distance.
Oh, Jesus. Okay, I can see why why Moscow is securing the way it did. I was sitting there going, I don't... Yes. I had thought Rostov, and I hadn't checked. We try to check absolutely everything before, and I was checking like a million other things, so I appreciate you doing that. I had thought it would be like a day and a half or 2 days. If it's 12 hours, yeah.
It's sphincter tightening time.
Speaking of, our head mod is suddenly he's on deck.
He's saying, "Shut Lance up while we can."
Yeah. Well, his name is of course Titan Uranus. So now everyone's like, the head mod is yep. So all right. So we're going to do a rundown for those of you just joining us. There is a lot going on. We're getting a lot of reports. We're trying to not put anything out that doesn't have some basis in reality that can be confirmed. We're going to put out things that are wrong. So far, I think we've gotten most things correct. But we're trying to figure out who's saying what and what's out there. What we know is this. We know that Prigozhin has been expressing considerable dissatisfaction with the Russian military over the last couple of months. It became more pronounced when he was order to take Bakhmut, suffered terrible losses in something that I think even he recognized was more of a symbolic victory than anything else. And when the Russian military stopped supplying him with the ammunition he needed, it decimated the Wagner group. And presumably this was because he had been seeking power. He wanted to become the commander-in-chief or whatever of the whole Russian military, and this was a way to keep him in check. He, about 2 days ago, came out with a video that was highly critical, said the entire war was fake, the entire war was a lie, there were no Nazis, and came out and basically confirmed everything that Ukraine has been saying about the war, about the tactics being used by the Russians and all this other stuff, and even said, look, you want to know why the Ukrainians are winning? It's because they care about the war, they care about their troops, they care about their equipment, and they don't care about spending ammunition. And I thought that was very well put for a guy who seems to be a reasonably terrible human being. So, anyways, he shortly thereafter, it looks like Russia, either with a missile or artillery, I don't know what, but they seem to strike one of the major positions held by Wagner. It was, from what all appearances are, it was a deliberate attack on Wagner by Russia, and Prigozhin turned around and all but declared war on Russia, said that he's going to invade Russia, and everyone who is not with him better get out of his way. So, he said that. We were wrapping up our regular Friday show with Starsky. And, Starsky was like, I'm going to get the popcorn. I was like, yeah, we didn't expect it was going to happen this quick. But there's now purportedly a rather large column of Wagner troops heading up through, oh, God. I've said the town like a gazillion times, and now I've... Rostov?
Yes.
Rostov, thank you. That's been purported.
Technically, that's not its name. It's Rostov-na-Don.
Rostov-na-Don. I was trying to figure out why every time I see it, it's got the... Okay, perfect. So we do know that there is significant traffic going up through Rostov. That we've confirmed what it is. I mean, obviously, it's most likely a column of some kind. We don't know how big. We don't know how many troops. He has claimed that he has 20,000 troops at his disposal and has now said that he is essentially invading Russia from multiple points, including from Rostov. Rostov, thanks to the commander, we now know, is about 12 hours from Moscow. We also know that Russia has closed those roads. I don't think they may end up, I would imagine they're going to detonate munitions on those roads or do something, but I certainly don't imagine that just putting up a closed sign, please do not use, is going to slow this down any. We also know that Moscow has deployed a number of tanks and armored personnel carriers across Moscow in an attempt to shore up its defenses. The presidential areas have all been sealed off and are inaccessible. We do not know where Putin is. We have no reason to believe anything harm has befallen him, but we don't know his status. Last I knew, he was on a train moving around. He has not come out and made a statement. There's been a lot of confusion about what's going on. Some calls by generals to get him to not go through with this attack. He appears to be trying to get the National Guard to join him. We don't know how much success he's had. We've had unconfirmed reports of at least one military encounter in which basically the National Guard collapsed and just ran away. So let's see. I think there was one other biggie that I've missed, but essentially it appears that Wagner is now attacking Russia. And the Prigozhin has said that his intention is to essentially remove the government of Russia, especially the military government from Russia, and that's what he is on his way to do. He has been placed under investigation by the FSB for inciting what was the term? Essentially a revolution. I forget what was the, it wasn't coup d'etat, but... and it wasn't insurrection. I don't know. My brain has lost some of my vocabulary. But at any rate, that's where we stand. Obviously, a lot is going on. The commander has said that he expects the Ukrainians to take advantage of this. So, Commander, I'm going to get a promotion on In Time. I always love these kinds of promotions. Titan said yesterday I should run for president. I have not only run for president, but I have won. I am president of Ukraine for the next 5 minutes, and I am going to my top commander, who unfortunately doesn't know any secrets. He just knows what he can see when he looks at the map. Given, sir, what you know about Ukraine and where its troops are currently deployed, I'm telling you I want to take advantage of this. What do you do?
The first question that I would ask is, where were the Wagner troops most recently deployed in the lines? Because it's a pretty safe bet they're not there anymore. And whoever is there, assuming they've even been replaced, is still trying to get settled or situated into those defensive lines. Those areas are likely to be weak. That's a good place to launch some sort of probing action. I would apply greater pressure in the areas you've already been applying pressure. In the south, that Zaporizhia to Melitopol axis of advance, because that entire area is going to be something that's supplied out of Rostov. And if Rostov is a scene of fighting, or if Prigozhin's forces have moved through there and stripped all the ammo and other supplies out of the depots in Rostov, that means the forces in that sector of the front are probably not as well supported and supplied as they could be. So now would be a good time to hit. The likelihood of reserves being able to be committed to reinforce a sector of the line where Ukrainian forces achieve a breakthrough would be similarly impacted, because everybody in the Russian High Command's attention is now focused razor sharp on that highway from Rostov to Moscow and the ring defenses around Moscow. What happens at the front right now to them is an irrelevancy. So for that brief, I'm guessing 12 to 18 hour period, you can attack and no reserves are going to be moving to shore up sections of the line that you breach. So that would be an area I would hit.
All right. So what we should be looking for is areas where, to the best of our understanding, Wagner were strong and were there, and that those are areas that now potentially are far more vulnerable. And I would assume if you're a Russian soldier sitting there going, "Oh thank God, I don't have to fight because Wagner's here," and they're going to Wagner, 𝐒𝐸𝐿 Wagner. All right. So that may accelerate their desire to start a major offensive.
Bueller.
Prigozhin. Ты хочешь чай? Prigozhin? Где? All right. So, difficult question, I would imagine. A lot of spitballing wouldn't have been a couple of years ago. But given that our understanding of Russia's military has changed dramatically in the last year, if Prigozhin has 20,000 troops, assuming the vast majority of them aren't the highest quality, but assuming they're loyal, and assuming that they've got trucks, maybe some mechanized equipment, whatever we know about their military status, and I think you'd be much more capable of guessing about that than I, but let's assume that he's got 20,000, and let's not assume it's like the highest end, but whatever we can assume about that. What do you think Russia's ability to defend itself in this case actually is, given our understanding of their military has changed dramatically over the last year?
So I would imagine that Prigozhin's going to take his top end troops with him when he does this. It's a make or break, all in kind of bet. And so leaving any of them in the front lines is stupid. It accomplishes absolutely nothing. Best guessed estimates pre-war, they were between 3,000 to 5,000 dedicated Wagner Group professional soldiers who had lots of combat experience, good training, were well equipped. So assume that group's with him. That leaves somewhere between 15 to 18,000 of the 20,000 that are going up the road to be chump change. The question is, who's in Moscow and along the route to stop him? Well, anybody along the route is either MVD Interior Ministry troops or local National Guard detachments. And the National Guard detachments, as we've already seen, have kind of shown themselves to not be particularly competent or dedicated. So they will delay the advance of the column, but they will not be able to stop it. The MVD forces, a lot really hinges on how much of their military assets, their armored personnel carriers and tanks, have been stripped away to replenish army losses in the Ukrainian war. So if we're talking just ill-equipped light infantry and trucks being the bulk of the MVD forces, those also will simply be brushed aside as this column advances. That leaves that final element of who's outside Moscow, who's in the ring defense. I can't remember which unit it is. I want to say it's the 2nd Guards Mechanized Division. They're like the ceremonial palace guard unit that's always stationed in Moscow. If they're there, those are reasonably competent, fairly well-equipped troops. How much actual combat experience they have, I don't know. I suspect that a lot of them are people who had influence exerted to ensure they were in a cushy job in Moscow rather than a muddy trench in Ukraine. So they're good but not good kind of troops. That's where the real fight will come. If they can hold out, then there's a good chance that that buys enough time for Putin and the military to mobilize forces, bring them to bear, and eventually numbers are always going to win out over quality, and they'll stop Prigozhin's attempt. If they can't stall him long enough, if their forces melt away, then he'll be in Moscow, he'll seize power, and it then becomes a question of who is going to remain loyal to the elected, I use air quotes, elected government under Putin, and who is going to be backing Prigozhin's coup. So you could potentially end up with a Russian Civil War scenario in that case.
I would like to point out real quick that
Sure.
Somebody had erroneously mentioned that Rostov was 110 miles from Moscow. It's 1,077 kilometers. But just to get the exact number of kilometers it was away, it gives me the directions. Helpfully, in case I wanted to travel from one city to the other, until you get to somewhere right around here in the middle of the E115 M4, where it quite helpfully mentions that parts of this road may be closed. Parts of this road may be closed. Parts of this road may be closed. So apparently there's several road closures, potential road closures, along the trip.
They're repairing damage from the spring rains.
I'm sure that's what it is.
So yeah, well we know they've closed a whole bunch of the roads. It's crystal clear to me, at least, that Moscow is taking this very seriously. We had someone suggest that they think Putin's not even in the country anymore. I have my own reasons why I don't think that's true. But any thoughts on that, Commander?
If he exits the country, then it's pretty much all over but the singing. I can't imagine Putin just melting away like that. It's not in the man's nature. I think he will fight to the very end. It's just, that's the character of the guy. They maybe sent one of his many decoys, his lookalikes, out to try to fool the other side that, oh yeah, Putin's left the country. Come on in, boys. The water's fine.
Assuming that he were actually able to do that, assuming that he's able to do that, though, I assume that any rule by Prigozhin isn't necessarily going to be any better than one by Putin. And I would like to point out that he did suggest in his revolutionary address that once he was done conquering Russia, he was going to go right back to the front lines to defend his homeland, which I didn't think Russia was his homeland. But at any rate, that's what he said. So what happens if he conquers Russia? What happens if he grabs control? Then what?
That's a tough call. Depending on how much opposition there seems to be, he may feel compelled to demonstrate his virility, his manliness, and continue the struggle to hold Ukraine. That isn't too dissimilar to what we saw with the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution, where even after the Tsar was out, people were still saying, oh no, we have to defend Russia's honor and continue to resist the Germans. Except the front was just dissolving as you watched. It was just ridiculous. But they had to go through these motions to pretend that they were tough. What you need is a true revolutionary who stands up and says, this is a mess. We need to stop the war right now.
All right. So, and I just wanted to remind people as well, and this is important, right before we started streaming this, we were ending with Starsky, and actually he was about maybe 15 or 20 minutes into his stream when alarms started going off and they started getting attacked. There was a large number of attacks going into Ukraine, and at this point, we believe that, what we're seeing here is that there are air alarms across basically all regions of Ukraine, and that cruise missiles are entering Ukrainian airspace. Ukraine is still under attack. This does not appear to have slowed down or in any way inhibited the missiles. Yes.
If you were a Russian command structure trying to forestall Ukraine from taking advantage of this mess, what would you do?
That's
your military isn't flexible enough to launch a ground drive, so what do? You toss every piece of airborne ordnance at the front lines that you can.
I think it's going to be an interesting next 12 hours. All right. And we have a couple of other reports. I'm trying to get confirmation on some of this stuff, but we're seeing from several different sources, several different pieces of information that suggest, and this would actually really have to be true. I mean, based on how we learned of this, it's basically like a few hours ago, or maybe 8 hours ago, or whatever it was, Russia bombed a Wagner position, and then Prigozhin came out and said, that's it, we're attacking, and then all of a sudden these columns came out of nowhere. But we're seeing a significant amount of evidence at this point that they may have written back to their families and said that things were about to change dramatically. Goodbye letters, or just, I love you letters sent back to family starting about 24 hours ago. So it looks like he had been planning this for some time, which would make sense, because I don't think you can just, put this all up. And then either Russia got advanced warning of this and somehow figured it out, and then did a preemptive strike against Wagner, or this was just The timing just coincided this way, but it looks like he'd been planning this for a little while, and I had suggested that. Now, one of the things I had suggested that he wouldn't do this unless he thought he had an ace in the hole, unless he had some other source of help. He obviously expects that some of the National Guard is going to assist him. He wasn't liked by the generals very much in Russia, was he? Would he have any other... Could he expect how much of the Russian military? We've had some reports, none of this confirmed, that the Air Force has refused to fire on that column. If that's true, that may be significant, but we're still trying to sort out what's actually happened from just what the reports are. So, can he expect support, do you think, from either any of the oligarchs, any politicians, or anybody in the military?
So, the National Guard, as I mentioned earlier, they're kind of the private armies of the oblast governors. And if he's made connections with a number of them, those groups could be mobilizing to assist him. What their quality would be in a fight, I think, would be somewhat limited, but bodies are bodies. The Air Force, I don't know. I think the Air Force and the Navy probably have enough of a dog in the fight that they're going to stay loyal. It's not their nature, but if there was a military surface that might defect, the Air Force would be, in my guess, the most likely. Just because they're a little more detached from the actual fighting that's been going on. So they may think, oh yeah, well, we know it's bad and we don't want to get thrown into that, so let's side with this guy and we can avoid getting ourselves shot to bits. That may be part of what's going on. I personally, as I said, I doubt that's what's at work. I think it's unlikely the Air Force would defect. The other two groups that nobody talks about, but all the oligarchs essentially have their own private armies too. They're nowhere near as big or powerful or well equipped, but it's people with weapons and with training, because they're all usually former, military special forces guys who were hired for that kind of work. So that's one group, and if he's made contact with enough oligarchs who think, yeah, Priggy's our boy, we're going to back him, then you get kind of a fifth column inside Moscow that can stir up all sorts of problems. And the final group, this is pure speculation, but we know that at one time Prigozhin was kind of an adjunct member of the Russian mafia. And the Russian mafia has a lot of fairly well-armed thugs that work for it, and he may have made a deal with somebody to get them involved. Again, I don't see that as particularly likely, but all of this is a possibility. So there are places he can draw support from if he has laid his groundwork beforehand. That said, Prigozhin hasn't yet impressed me as a guy who is really a good planner.
And Starsky, I wish I'd written this down, because Starsky had mentioned sort of the difference between, oh, dear Lord, no, I can't remember, but somebody who was cunning and somebody who was, I don't know if methodical or at least well planned out. So, someone, Prigozhin probably plans pretty well. He's in the military, so he's a planner. And he works with his troops, and he's engaged on that level, but he's not cunning per se. Putin is cunning, and so I think what Starsky said earlier, I like this line. He said, for the most part, all Russians are cunning, but they're not they don't plan well. Whereas what makes Prigozhin different is he's a planner, but he's not very cunning. So I thought that was an interesting distinction. We've seen. Thank you, Bregwin. We've seen some evidence that there are people leaving Moscow, which would not be surprising, but certainly, what for me would be most interesting about that is, hold on. Oh dear Lord. What surprised? What that would mean would be that the news is spreading, because obviously they're not going to be talking about this on. They're not going to be talking about this in the media if they can possibly help it. So somehow people are finding out. So if you're, we've talked about the Russian psyche before, and we've talked about how much they may or may not know about the war. What impact do you think, Commander, and I'm aware that you're running up on time here, but what impact do you think this is going to have on them, and how, again, there's going to be some significant speculation, how much do you think that people are going to become aware of this, and how quickly?
I think they will find out, or at least get some murky news about it very quickly. Going back into, the Soviet era, the Bolshevik era even, when controls on the information that flowed were very, very rigid, the people still had a fair idea of kind of what was going on, and it's all through local gossip and people sharing that, oh, my brother in Omsk told me X. Oh, yeah, well, I heard from my sister in Ekaterinburg that it's this. And they kind of can put a reasonable picture together of what's happening. Time-wise, I think because of social media and cell phones, et cetera, as we've been seeing with all these intercepted phone calls from the front, the troops at the front are calling their wives. So their wives are, fully aware of how the conditions at the front. Added to that is the fact that all the wives of people from that village or that town or that city are going to be sharing information because they all know one another's sons, husbands, or whatever are at the front. So they have a fairly good picture of how bad things are. And I suspect that as this develops, that news is also going to leak out, because you'll get some guy on the Rostov to Moscow highway who sees his whole column of guys going up the road, and they're shooting at the policemen who are trying to stop them, and they'll say, something's going on. They'll get on their cell phone and call their cousin in Kursk and say, hey, did you know? And news will get out. What their reaction is going to be, who knows? I honestly think that they're kind of preconditioned to remain loyal to the Tsar, be it Putin or Nicholas, but that's what will probably be their initial inclination, unless morale at home has gotten so bad because of all the losses at the front, all the privation from the sanctions. If the morale has gotten that bad, to your average Ivan in the street, then there may well be everybody just kind of marches on Moscow and it's over for Putin. But I haven't seen anything in the number of man in the street interviews that I've seen done in Moscow and St. Petersburg and such that suggests there's that kind of dissatisfaction with the regime yet.
Yeah.
I mean, there may be in people's hearts, but until they're willing to start at least obliquely talking about it in those interviews, and they're not doing that for the most part, until that happens, I don't think they're at the point where they would say, okay, screw it, we got to get rid of Pooters.
So, I think we're going to start to wrap this up. I do want to ask, if you're Putin right now, what do you do?
If I were Putin, first damn thing I'd do is go on national TV with a live broadcast and all the generals, arrayed with me, and, make a statement. This man is attempting to overthrow our government. He is an agent of a foreign power. NATO has bought him out. He's trying to destroy us. He's trying to help the Ukrainians. Everybody should rally to me, and we will stop this evil menace. And done with the right inflection and the right tone, that will probably work. That's the way the Russian people have, over centuries, been conditioned. That's what I would do.
Well, and you had actually mentioned this at the beginning of the show as a possible motive for the attack. Anyway, what ends up happening then too is he can take away from the fact that they've been losing in Ukraine, from the fact he's made all the wrong decisions, from the humiliating defeats, because now we're all one Russia under attack by NATO vis-a-vis Prigozhin.
Right. Yeah, it's all, hey, look, a convenient scapegoat. Let's dump all the shit in the toilet on him.
Well, and that's, again, we talk, that's, China does the same thing with Taiwan, and, whenever a country needs yeah. All right, we did get a super chat, which I think I missed. I do appreciate it. We've just been, it's been a lot, so I'm going to read those. I'm going to ask Zandering for any final thoughts. I think there's going to be a lot going on throughout the rest of the night. We have, on occasion, kept streaming for like 8, 12, I think 14 hours was our longest during the, that wasn't January 6th, that was, but I think that was at the start of the riots. If I thought we were going to have constantly updating news during that time, I would do it. Obviously, we're looking to see for evidence out of I've forgotten it again, Rostov? Evidence out of Rostov, for just what is the size of this force, and if Prigozhin is telling the truth when he says there are other forces or other assault forces from Wagner attacking. I think all of that's going to be relevant, but we don't know that yet, so I think rather than just stay on the air for the whole time, we'll be updating that on our Discord if there is something significant, if we feel at some point like this is credibly likely to end the Putin regime. I think we will go on air immediately as soon as we reach the conclusion that that's a distinct possibility. But barring that, I think there's going to be enough incremental updates sort of over time. It's not going to be worth it streaming for the whole time. So Godzilla music for £4. It's a good job. Putin held one tank back for the parade. He may need it soon. Oh, that's good. That's really good. Thanks for covering this. Our pleasure. Thank you very much for your support. The other thing I was thinking was he held back a lot of their top planes because he didn't want to lose the 5th-gen fighters in Ukraine. So it's like that may end up, being a worthwhile move. So that one tank. I'm sorry.
I would note that the fact that you only saw one tank in the parade did not mean that there weren't a hell of a lot of tanks in the Moscow area. But if you're worried about a coup, just remember what happened to Anwar Sadat during a military parade.
That's not, Anwar Sadat sounds so familiar, but I'm drawing a blank.
He's the Egyptian prime minister, and radical faction in the Egyptian military. They were doing a big parade past the president or the prime minister. And then suddenly guys just jumped out of trucks and shot the reviewing stands up and killed him.
I don't know why I'd completely forgotten. Well, I think I'm going to make that into a meme, just the one tank, defending Moscow. Sister Porpoise,
I agree. It's hilarious, but I think it's a pretty safe bet that he's been holding troops back for just this kind of eventuality, that there might be a coup attempt.
Well, we've already seen APCs and tanks coming out in Moscow, so I think that's a fair point and an important observation, which is he does have them. So, $5, Sinister Porpoise. Trust me, I'm a member of the Russian press, and I'm here to help. Thank you, Porpoise, for that. We really appreciate your support. Thank you so much. And Niall Zedem, 5 gifts gifted in time show, 5 memberships, and I think someone had done that on the previous show, and we really appreciate that. That helps out a lot and gives people an opportunity to be part of the channel. So thank you all so much for that. So I think we're going to go with sort of final thoughts. And like I said, we're going to be in standby, I think, for the rest of the foreseeable future. We will start streaming again if there's any significant news that changes the nature one way or another of what we have so far. But barring that, let's start with 𝐒𝐸𝐿𝐴𝐸𝐸. What are your thoughts on what we have seen so far over the last 2 or 3 hours?
It has been very interesting, and it will be continue to be interesting to see where this leads.
This is so we just got this. It looks like they're the Russian search engine Yandex has begun filtering out results from Prigozhin. So this is the standard Soviet. With Prigozhin, we never knew. It's like Stalin with the photo of the guy that used to be there, and now he's been wiped out. It looks like they're starting to do that with Prigozhin. So
erase the commissar from the photograph.
Yeah, exactly. So, Commander, any final thoughts as to what we're seeing here? Any insights or any questions that you have about that would help you shore up your opinions on what's going to happen over the next day or two with all of this?
The two things I would keep an eye out for, which will help clarify fairly quickly what the real situation is. One, if and when Putin makes some sort of broadcast, that will be an important thing, because if he starts, blaming Prigozhin, that lets you know which side of the fence Prigozhin is on. The second thing I would keep an eye out for is what the Ukrainian military does within the next 24 hours. Because if they're going to try to take advantage of it, it'll have to be very soon, and that's when it'll happen. If they are still going to stick whatever their long-range plan was, which I'm not saying is a bad idea, I'm just saying that, this is a fleeting opportunity, and if they decide to stick with their plan, then nothing unusual will have occurred within the next 24 hours. Those are the two things I think are the big things to watch for.
All right. Well, thank you both very much. For those of you just joining us, welcome. Goodbye. We're covering what appears to be a coup attempt by Prigozhin of the Wagner Group for the sins committed by the Russian military over the last couple of months. We've covered that at the beginning. I won't cover that again. But his claim is that he's got at least 20,000 troops and that he is marching on. Thank you again, Commander. Thank you so much for joining us. He's marching on Moscow. We will see how far he gets and if, in fact, that's true. But Moscow's taking this seriously. They've encircled Moscow with tanks. They've shut down roads, checkpoints, and there is some reports of skirmishes. So as this situation unfolds, we will update you. We'll also be keeping things up to date on our Discord. So check us out there. Make sure you like and subscribe so that you can get updates as we go live to let people know how this is going forward. Thank you all once again for your support, and we will see you on our next update, which I have a feeling will be probably in a couple of hours. Have a good night, all.